The street committee meeting to order. Stand for the pledge, please. Kim?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do a roll, Kathy, please.
Yes. Walther?
Here.
Pickett?
Here.
Carter?
Here.
All righty. Thank you. I think I'm going to kind of skip around the agenda if you guys don't mind. Maybe we can get a couple things done here. First off, Alan, can you, I know, thanks for putting this agenda together. Can you give us an update on a couple of these projects? The Taylor Road culvert replacement? If we'd start with that one, that's number 8.
Okay. Taylor Road Culvert Replacement Project, that one, we're waiting on the materials. It's a 60-inch concrete pipe. It is on order, and I believe it's Forterra now. It used to be Hanson Pipe or Hancor Pipe. That's who they're getting those through, and don't have a date on that yet.
Okay. All right, and how many days, how long of a duration is that closure on that?
We're
Is that going to be a
anticipating-
full closure?
Yeah, it'll be full closure to take that out, and then we're going to put it back with concrete. So we're looking at a 1 to 2 week closure for that.
Okay, are you worried at all about the asphalt? I mean, we think it's going to be October, or?
Well,
Any-
we're actually going to put it back with concrete over top of the concrete.
Oh,
pipe
okay,
to
no
bridge
pavement.
that, so we don't have any settling or minimize the settling.
Okay.
So I don't think it'll be a problem to get it done in November, if it takes that long.
Okay, great. Next one would be, unless anybody has any questions on that, all right. Number 7, let's go to Columbia Road culvert replacement.
Columbia Road culvert replacement, we had the pre-con on that here last week. They'll be submitting shop drawings for the box culvert here in the very near future. That one again is lead time on that, but they're anticipating being started by October 9th. And again, on that one, once they get the materials, the box culvert being the main thing, it won't take them long to get that done. I think we're expecting about a 45-day closure. We're anticipating it's going to be less than that.
Okay. And then one that we don't have on here, the other Columbia Road bridge replacement.
Columbia Road Bridge replacement, ODOT has had, it's Buds Inc. doing the work. They've had them put the detour up, or at least some signs up letting people know that that's going to be closed. It is scheduled for, make sure I get the date right, I'm pretty sure it's September 17th is the date on that. It's 18, yes, thank you.
Okay. You see any problems with that one starting on time?
You know, ODOT's handling that, so I've kind of tried to stay out of the way, just make sure they're getting me updates. And that reminds me that I'll be reaching out to them. They're supposed to give us their public information officer's notice, and they have not gotten that to us yet, and that's only a week away, and we need to get public notice out on that. So I'll be reaching out to them tomorrow.
And that's a 75-day closure, correct?
Yes.
So 2.5 months. So Thanksgiving opening, hopefully.
Plus or minus, yes.
Okay.
Chairman.
Go ahead.
Alan, I'm sure you're doing it, but I just want to, I always remind you, make sure that you let school districts know
Yes.
on all those closures, because they're going to have to reroute some significant stuff.
ODOT and the contractor said that they will do it, but we've also let the people know, that school districts specifically know. So I think they're already rerouting buses in anticipation of that. And we have, of course, let the fire and police know.
Good. 310 will be closed for a portion of that time as well, right?
Yes. And I don't remember what the exact date's on that they're closing that again, but I think it's going to be for another 2 or 3 weeks, and it's supposed to happen this month.
Wow. Okay.
Get around.
What, the item that you have on here, you have a retainer report. Mind going through that?
Yes, in the packet that I gave you, it is the second to last thing to the end. And that's just providing what Jobs and Henderson has done this year under the retainer. It's about a page and a half long of different items. I know that's something we want to keep track of and make sure that we're getting our money's worth out of that. So we had them put this together to see what all we have done this year, and it's a fairly extensive list of items they've helped us out with under that retainer.
I assume you've got hours also. You're what, for each one of these, you know what kind of duration they put in or hours they put in?
Plus or minus, I don't have it logged specifically.
Right. I don't
but-
think we need to know, but just you're watching that, so, okay. Any questions on that, committee?
Not yet, but I'm still reading it.
No.
I don't think I have any questions.
Okay, I'd like to digest that, I guess, a little
Yeah,
bit.
that's a large list.
Come back, and if I have a question, I'll.
And then, last one, which I think is a quick hit, is the change order or the proposed change order from Shelley Company. You want to give us an update on that?
Okay, yeah, the 2017 ramp, I'll just give a full update on that. It's been going pretty well. The chip seal is complete. All the mainline paving is done, and they're working on the finishing up the driveways, which should be complete today. So that leaves some berm work, some concrete work, adjusting grade on valves and manholes and catch basins. So we've got, and those are fairly minor work to do. Won't disrupt traffic nearly as much as the paving operations. I don't have a good number yet because we're waiting to finish up the driveways to see how far under budget we are. I'm very confident that we are well under budget. From my numbers, I'm guessing we're somewhere in the vicinity of 50,000 under budget on that. What I put in here is there was a resident concern about the chip seal that we did on, I believe it was Charles Drive, but we did chip seal on Charles and Daly, Helen and Christie Lee, and Saddle Path. They were concerned about how that looked. So somebody made the suggestion that we could fog seal that to make it look a little nicer. And a fog seal is basically just kind of a sand and emulsifier mixture that's black that would coat the whole road. It would help seal in the stone, and it would also make it look a little bit more like pavement. So they provided us, Shelley Company provided us a change order number on that at 18,000. So I wanted to bring that to the Streets Committee to see if there was any interest in doing that. Like I said, we're a fair amount under budget. It would make it look nice. That's basically where we're at. So.
Do you think it has any structural benefit?
I'm not terribly experienced with it. I would guess that it might give us a couple more years before we had to do maintenance on it, because it would help to seal that stone in, because of course you put the tar down, you put the chip on top of that. If you seal in the chips, the stones, then that would in theory help it last a little bit longer before we'd have to do maintenance on it.
I have just a quick question, and it's I noticed on some of the main lines, they paved the main lines and didn't do the driveway skirts. They came back and did that. I had a citizen call and ask me why, and I didn't know. So.
The reasoning on that is mostly for time savings and efficiency for the contractor, but also being able to do, you want to do the main lines all at one time so that so you can roll that in and keep that looking good. And then you can come back and do the driveways, because that's going to, it's easier for them to come back and do them. That way they're also not running the paver over fresh pavement. Give it a couple days to cure. So they did put lips down, specifically on township roads where we had a pretty big lip. So they had ran asphalt out at more than a slope than we wanted, but enough that people should be able to get in and out while they're doing that. And then, of course, today they came back and they're doing those driveways. Does that answer your question?
It does.
How much, is there a cost savings for doing the additional seal on the road? I mean, will it, in a couple years, you said it would save us a couple years of maintenance. In a couple years, what would that maintenance cost be?
I think with the chip seal, you want to ideally come back after about 7 years, plus or minus, is when you want to come back and chip seal it again. So at that 7-year mark, if we had fog sealed it now, we might be able to push that out 8 or 9 years and then come back with a second chip seal. That's, like I said, I'm not terribly experienced with that specifically.
Alan, we talked about this. We don't know if there's really a temperature constraint on this or if there's a timing constraint on this. Could they do it in October? Could they do it in November? One of the things I'm imagining you're seeing is dust from the chip and seal, and that's probably what the people are, I would assume that they're having concerns about. That's obviously going to dissipate in a couple weeks after running on it. Should we, I guess I would just wonder if there's a timing on this, a time constraint on this.
I can check. I would imagine, I know Shelley's wanting to kind of get things wrapped up, so if we did decide to do it, they'd probably try and come back here very soon and get it done. So I would think they could get it done in September without any problems. And I can check to see if, like October, November, if the temperature would be a problem.
That's probably that'd be my direction. That's where I would be heading.
Yeah, because I don't feel like for $18,000, if it's purely aesthetics, that it needs to be done. Summit was done with chip and seal, and it's fine. Right. So if it's just because it'll make it look better, then that's not okay.
That was the original reason that we considered it, was for aesthetics. We considered after the fact that, well, it might give us a little bit more in the long run, but it's mostly aesthetics, yes.
If we do decide to do it, it'll have to be approved by council. Is that right?
Oh, I don't, it's under, well, I don't know that it would have to.
I'm trying to think if change orders have to go through.
I think since the whole project is under budget, that it wouldn't have to.
Right, this is a replacement unit, essentially.
Right.
I don't think it would have to, Tim.
All right.
Well, I guess we'd stop here, because I think we're going to need to have another Streets Committee meeting here very soon, like within 2 weeks, to talk about, 3 weeks when you're back, to talk about a little bit more with Oak Meadow and some drainage issues that we're not going to be able to fully go through today. So my idea is to maybe get some of those, get some more information on it. I was going to talk to a couple of contractors also and see what, benefit they might think this might have.
Okay.
And maybe when we come back in the next meeting, we'll see what we can do.
Some more information, make a more informed choice.
Yep, exactly.
Down with that.
Last, I think easier than others, is the retention detention basin analysis. Can you give us an update on that?
Yep, and that's just an update. There's two things we're waiting on. One, we've identified where everything is. We've inventoried them. We've got assessments on them. It's just a matter of putting the final report together. So I'm anticipating that here within the next couple of weeks. And then the other part of it is getting the ordinance drafted so that we can enforce maintenance of the detention ponds on private property. And that I'm anticipating all that should be here in the next couple of weeks, that we should get that information.
So will the analysis have a maintenance plan for each one of the ponds, or is that something that's still?
It will have a recommended maintenance for the at least top 10 retention basins that have an issue, or stormwater basins.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And is it your anticipation that you'll look at those and then contact the individual private property management companies or owners and say?
Yeah, the ones that are ours, we still have $15,000 in this year's budget to go out and try and get something done to those. I've got a couple in mind specifically, but wanted to wait for the report to make sure that those matched up with the worst ones. So we're hitting the ones that are in most ill repair, I guess. And then yes, for the ones that are others' responsibility, once we had the ordinance in place, I would reach out to them and say, hey, here's what we need to do.
In your mind, what will end up defining worst ones?
It depends. Some of them are fairly well maintained. Some of them, maybe the outlet structure, it needs repairs to it. Specifically on some detention basins, there's they basically choke down the pipe. It's an orifice plate. Some of those have been ripped off or are damaged, so they're pretty simple, or just need some flora removed, cattails, or they've silted in some. So those are some of the moderate ones. Some of them are really bad in that the outlet structure is damaged, or it's not functioning at all, like the water's just passing through completely, or there's a lot of cattails and you can't even really get to them to maintain them. So in the report, they're putting that on a rating system, so that we'll have, it's from 1 to 10. I don't remember which one's highest at present. I think it's 10 is the worst. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. 8. Okay, so 8 is about the worst that we have on there, and those will be looked at first.
Do you anticipate doing that with a letter or in person?
I hadn't got there yet.
Okay.
Usually I like to start in person.
Okay. I guess we'll move on to drainage. So we've got several items of drainage here. The first one I wanted to ask about was the gentleman that came to council a few meetings ago, Mr. Hughes, I believe his name was.
Yes,
Is that International Drive, is that correct?
that is correct.
Can you give us an update on that?
Yes. So there's a couple things in Mr. Hughes' concern. One being the drainage coming from the restaurant behind him, and
Tim Hortons.
Taco Bell.
Oh, Taco Bell, Taco Bell.
I think it's Taco Bell or KFC, is it? I think it's Taco Bell. Basically, there's a stormwater basin located behind Taco Bell that does not receive any water. There's an outlet structure, there's a basin there, but it seems to have been bypassed at some point. So what happens is the water that should go there instead jumps the curb and goes down between Mr. Hughes' house and his neighbor to the east. So as I've let him know on that, that's part of the retention-detention effort, so that we can get an ordinance in place. Right now, we could go to Taco Bell and say, hey, can you do this? But to my knowledge, there's nothing that we can enforce that with. So that's part of that effort. The second concern is actually his neighbor's ditch. So he believes that there was never any ditches in that along International Drive. It does not appear that way to me. The empirical evidence, there's culverts underneath of at least half of those driveways, or roughly half of those driveways, which tells me that there were ditches in there at some point. Also, the things that were done at that time, like the Oak Meadow subdivision, for example, similar kind of thing where there's no curb and gutter, there's no real storm water or storm sewer system, there's ditches and culverts. So there's some places where there's definitely ditches, there's definitely culverts. There is some storm sewer under there. We have not mapped that out yet to know where it all goes, and I haven't found any plans that tell me where it goes. So the issue is that his neighbor, in front of his neighbors, at one point I think somebody did pipe that in between the ditches, or it filled in between the ditches, between the driveways. And so the streets department went in before I was here and dipped that out, cleaned it out from driveway culvert to driveway culvert. That is deeper than Mr. Hughes prefers that it be, but we went from invert to invert, so bottom of pipe to bottom of pipe, and just cleaned that out so the water would flow. He doesn't like that. I think he wants a pipe in there. We currently don't really allow pipes to be put into ditches because it causes us more problems than it solves. Usually, first owner it's probably fine, but 40 years down the road, somebody says, well, the city needs to do something about that, and our solution is restore it to a ditch. And some people don't really care for that. So it's a ditch. It's deeper than he cares for it to be, but I don't really have an intent to do much with that. And his neighbor, we worked with his neighbor. He came out and we worked through a solution where we kind of graded it back a little bit, and we haven't heard anything from his neighbor since. And then the last part of it is there is a pipe that comes up into that ditch where it drops down into a storm sewer below. That did not have a cap on it. I think the cap got blown away at some point, so we went back with a cast iron cap here about a week and a half ago and put that in there, so it should stay in place.
Any questions on that?
Well, having been out there, I guess and looked at it, one of my questions relates specifically to the cap. According to the neighbors, or according to a couple of different people, the caps were essentially forced off by water, which I believe, but those are going someplace.
Yes.
And so we when you talked about whether or not there's a pipe there, you said you believe there is a storm sewer there, but he can't. I mean, that can't be tied in. We can't map that. What is the, if there is that system there? And I realize that thank you very much for having talked to me about it, because I know I peppered you with a bunch of questions one time because I didn't understand why there would be ditches and storm sewers there. But we don't know where that storm sewer system goes.
Currently, that is correct. This part of Weed is not. We are currently getting our GIS up and running and trying to get all those things mapped. And once we get mapped where they are, and part of that will be doing some dye testing to figure out, dropping some tablets of dye into the water and see where they go, because we don't have that information right now. Previous service directors may have that information, and I'm looking to get some of that information.
I think I actually did ask Kathy about it and shot you and BJ a quick message when she had talked to Louis. So,
okay. So we're looking to get that information. We don't have it right now. And what that does is there's the ditch, and then there's a pipe that goes down, and then there is a pipe down below that somewhere. But that is at the level of the bottom of the ditch currently, if that makes sense.
you mean the pipe that's coming up is a yes?
Correct.
And I'm just trying to figure out if one person wants a pipe there, it seems to follow that there already is a pipe there. It's just deeper than.
There is a pipe there and there's a ditch there, right? Yes.
And that's the part to me that's confusing.
Very much so.
I guess as a follow-up, since we're on that subject,
Yep.
It kind of dovetails with what you just talked about in the retention, the schedule for the retention stuff. Is it too early to know if that particular non-functioning retention basin is going to be addressed in the first Magic 10, or?
I would presume it would be near the top, and then with the ones that are privately maintained, I think we would be able to move a little quicker to get all of those addressed sooner, once we have the ordinance in place to enforce that. So the ones that will address that are ours will, of course, go by the rating scale. And I guess with the privately owned ones, we'd still go by the rating scale, but I would presume that'd go a little quicker because it's just a matter of me reaching out to them to say, hey, you need to do something about this, vice us having to come up with the money and a plan to do something about it. And then with International Drive, I do have that listed as a CIP project. It's several years out with the way the budget's looking, behind 2 or 3 other projects, including Taylor Road, Oak Meadow, Foundation Park to the river that goes behind some houses in Oak Meadow, and the Kyle Moore Graham Road. I think it's 4th and behind those 3. To get some storm sewers back there and get that all solved and get rid of these nuances.
Is it ahead of Summit?
Well, Summit's a little bit different situation. Specifically, that one is more private, and we're still waiting to hear back on that one. So in that regard.
And on Taylor, you're talking where it goes underneath over to COTC?
Yeah, there basically from the tracks
Right.
down to
Okay.
Broad Street, yes.
Anything else on that, Tim?
No, sir.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that that's probably one of your top ones to get resolved. And I'm not sure if it makes any sense in the next few hard rains to go out there and really videotape what's going on and really see what's happening. We may get hit, if Thursday or Friday we get a lot of rain, maybe worthwhile going up there just to see why the basin is being bypassed. Just thought.
I've definitely seen that it's bypassed, and I've seen it going over the curb, and that catch basin's kind of full as it is. So,
Just for the restaurant owner
Yes.
who hasn't probably
Fair
been
enough.
out there and seen it, might be worth videotaping to show him that, or her, that it isn't working properly. Okay. Well, let's I guess stay on the drainage theme. Let's go to the Kyle-Moore drainage.
no more. So that one, at the last Streets Committee meeting, We talked about I'd given the draft study, and where we're at with that is waiting for comments from the Streets Committee. I don't know if I had said that at the last one. We wanted to see if there was any comments from the Streets Committee on that before they finalized the draft report.
Right, and I provided you a couple comments,
Did?
and hopefully we can, we're going to hear back from Strand here sooner rather than later on that, and then we can reevaluate that. So, and the biggest comment that I had made, just so the rest of the committee knows, in looking at the overall aerial map, wondering why this water doesn't, I think that's south, why it doesn't go south. It shows a blue line stream. It doesn't seem to be out there at this point. So wondering why these online ponds aren't functioning properly and why that stream is no longer there. Looks like we're impounding water in a wetland area that should have a natural drainage course to the south instead of coming in and putting in pipe and redirecting it to the west, to the other creek that does seem to be out there. That's one of the questions that I had asked. Which way did this water go prior to this development? Because if somebody has filled in a ditch or has redirected water, I don't think that's the city's issue. I think it's ours to enforce natural drainage and drainage law, but it's not ours to go fix it. That's my opinion. So that's what I asked Alan to see if Strand has that same opinion. I don't know that there's anything else on that right at the moment. I guess we're kind of waiting on that. We have two options. There's two piping options, just so if everybody remembers the report that was provided. There's two piping options. One of them is I think a 300 and, what is that? One's a 416,000 option, and one is that's corrugated pipe. And then the other one is a $282,000 option. So, wait to see. All right. Any questions on that, committee? All right. Anything else on that you have, Alan?
Not specifically, other than budget, and I think we'll have a little bit, I'll talk a little bit more about that maybe when we get to Oak Meadow, but I guess the preliminary on that is we had $30,000 in this year's budget for the engineering on that. We spent $12,000 roughly on the study. So when we actually go to, if we decide to go to engineering on this, I would imagine it's going to cost more than that $18,000 that we have remaining. So I've got an idea for the use for the rest of that money, which we'll talk about when we get to Oak Meadow.
And you would bounce that funding, engineering funding, to the following year?
Correct. I've got that in our proposed budget model, which council will be seeing in the next couple of weeks, I believe.
Well, we'll wait for Oak Meadow for that. Well, I think I have an idea what you're going to suggest. Anyhow, okay, let's talk Cable Road drainage.
Cable Road.
Go ahead
okay.
and give us a review of that.
Yeah, so the situation on Cable Road is basically the road had flooded. We're out just west of Headley's Mill, between Headley's Mill and Corder Road. The road had flooded during the storms that we had in July. So that's where the city comes in, because it was a problem for the road and the subsurface of the road. There is a little bit of dispute on which way the water should have went. And I have involved Jobs Henderson in this one fairly heavily, because there is a conflict of interest for me as I rent from one of the landowners out there. So that's basically the situation. So what we're looking at is the natural flow of the water. I've provided some topographic maps in what I provided to the Streets Committee. There's two different ones on 11 by 17. One is where I had done an analysis of what water I believed would have gone to the south based on the topographic maps. And there's another one that Jobs Henderson had done independently from mine that is very similar, showing where they show the water would have went based on those topographic maps that we have. I guess you could give the disclaimer that the topographic maps were not based on a specific survey. They're aerial flown. And the relief is, there's not a whole lot of relief out there, so it appears that the water would have went south from surface water. Subsurface water, there was some debate on where the subsurface water would have went. I don't think that's really relevant to our conversation, as we only need to concern ourselves with surface water and protecting the road. So currently there is and then the other piece of information, which I think Jobs might have, is a survey. We'd met out on site and did a little looking around out there, and also had Jobs get some survey to see what it looks like local within the right-of-way. And I have not provided that. Do we have that by chance? It's upstairs? Okay. So we'll get that and we'll look at it. That could help us decide what we need to do. So like you said, we'll have another Streets Committee meeting in the near future. So maybe we just get that information so that we can make a good informed decision at that time. So I'll continue with the presentation though. Temporary solution, the tile was repaired and to some extent and cleaned out to some extent to give us a temporary solution. So the water has receded for now, but I think we still need to look at our long-term solutions. And for those, I see 4 options. Option number 1 would be putting a storm sewer down the north side of Cable Road. I'll give the options and I'll come back and give what some of the details on them. Option number 2 would be putting a storm sewer down the south side of the road. Option number 3 would be putting a culvert across the road. And option number 4 would be do nothing. So the first option, running a storm sewer along the north side of the road, is probably the best solution for everybody the way I see it. It would put no additional water, additional in air quotes, because there probably was at some point water going to the south before the road was there. It looks like from the topo maps. So it would put no additional water to the south. It would help potentially drain the field to the north without having to deal with drain tile, but a lot of it would drain to that point, and we could drain it to the east. And it avoids crossing the road. The road out there is actually in pretty good shape, and I like to avoid crossing the road when we can. The problem with this solution is there's about 600 feet of storm sewer that would be required, and we usually put in no less than 12-inch tile when we put in storm sewer. And the prices I have right now, I would assume somewhere around $40 a foot, which is around $25,000 to do that. And that is plus or minus option number 1. I guess I'll pause there for any questions on that.
Do you feel that that's something that can be done in-house, with in-house personnel?
I would like to say yes, but I'm not terribly comfortable with our... there's places we'd be about 8 or 9 foot deep going through on the north side, which would require trench box or laying back the excavation so that there's not anything over 4 or 5 foot in that area. You have to have a trench box so it doesn't cave in, or you have to lay it back. So there's really no room to lay it back, and we don't have a trench box. Aside from that, our guys are pretty good. We did lose our best operator when it comes to digging not too long ago. So I'm not terribly comfortable with doing that right next to the road and with the restoration side of it as well. So where I'd like to say that we could, if it was just in a field, I'd feel a lot more comfortable about it. But right next to the road, it wouldn't be ideal.
Okay, so I'm going to jump into 2 other questions. If it was just a crossing that you were going to put in, would you be able to do that in-house?
Yes.
And then anything on the south side of the road that gives you pause for you guys doing it? Same reasoning on the south side of the road, not to be able to do it in-house?
On the south side of the road, the negative in my mind is that we'd still have to cross the road. And then it would actually be, as far as just the run from west to east, once we crossed the road, it would be a little bit shallower. The elevation of the pipe would be the same, but the hill's higher on the north side of the road, so we wouldn't have to dig as deep, which would be cost savings most likely.
When I was out there with you, they had mentioned there was a discussion about a drain that drained the roadway, 4-inch or 6-inch that was placed when that road was built. Have you seen anything plan-wise that confirms that is in there?
I have not. I've not found the plans for that, so I was not able to confirm where that was or if that was put in.
So just to, when I was out there, this is an area that is, it looks to me at least like large ponding water on the north side. The south side has topo that probably would let the water go south, but would stop at some point. Doesn't seem to go all the way to the creek. As Alan said, this is probably topo that's on the aerial flown stuff, so, or even maybe not even flown, quite frankly, but that the county has, so it's plus or minus a few inches. And we talked about how to deal with this, and I guess my opinion is that to have a roadway drainage system is much better than to try to rely on tile. Tile is something that's gonna have to be repaired in the future that we can't get to, we don't have an easement on it. And it also is going to rely, one side of the road or the other is going to rely on somebody else's personal, private tile, as well as the city relying on it with, for its drainage of the roadway. Is that fair to say, Alan?
Plus or minus?
Plus or minus? Okay. So I think it really comes down to a couple questions is which side of the road do we want to run the tile on, or do we just want to present a crossing, which I think doesn't solve the problem per se. I was going to ask you, so you're going to find out from the topo that you guys shot while you're out there to
Yes.
see if a crossing would actually provide enough relief from the north side to the south side and allow the drainage to occur naturally,
Right.
not tile-wise.
So part of the question is, could we get a culvert underneath the road? Is there enough from the ditch and the surface of the road, is there enough cover there to get a tile in? I believe that is correct, but haven't seen the topo yet to see exactly where that would be. I believe that putting a culvert across the road would, in effect, solve the city's concern about the road itself. It would drain the subgrade, it would drain the road, so that any water that did get there would cross and go to the south. Part of the challenge with that to the south is when you look at the topo, it looks like the field to the south would have drained to the southeast, and where it would have naturally drained, it looks like there's a house there now. So at some point, it looks like that natural drainage had been filled in, and that's one of the reasons that it makes one of the storm sewer options one of the better options, because then we're not dealing with something further down the road, because I think that field to the south does rely on tile currently to drain.
Right. The only other thing was we did find a utility on the north side, if I remember correctly, buried phone, I think it was, or?
There's a phone on the north side, that is correct, and outside of the limits of where we had OOPSed, there's also a gas line, so we would have to identify the location of that as well.
Okay. So I think this is one that's probably going to be further information, topo about a ditch or whatever could happen with that, and then maybe some additional cost estimating just to make sure, to make a decision on which side of the road to put the drainage. But it was a pretty large impoundment of water, and it was basically all the way up to the asphalt. It was at one point.
Yeah, and it stayed on the road. Of course, we had the flooding on the 13th of July. It stayed on the road for at least another week, if not 2 weeks, actually out onto the road, and then receded some. But it was, last I looked, there was still water in the ditch next to the road, so that's still affecting the subgrade of the road.
So,
I'd,
go ahead.
I'd like to know the difference between the north and south costs on, assuming we get it to the south, would the city get it to the south? Or would you not need to do that if you put it in on the south?
We would still need to cross the road. to
All
go
right,
to the south.
and would the city do that, or would that be part of the entire project? Once you're doing this much, do you have the same company go across to the north?
I would say, if I understand what you're asking, we would do that all as one project, cross the road to the south and then run it to the east. Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to see the comparisons of those, and I think on Monday there was also, the individual that owns that property also had concerns about making sure if we choose the north option, that it be replaced to what it was. So, I mean, I don't, that's just a concern. I'm sure you heard it, so, especially since you rent. But
Yeah, on any
You live there.
public project, we have restoration included, and they would be compacting as they put back in and then restore that, and that's something we would have a 1-year warranty on as well. to make sure that if it wasn't put back initially right or it settled some, that the contractor would come back that first year and make it right.
Is this something that you're proposing to put in the 2018 ramp?
I did not have a slot for it yet. I wanted to see, get the feel for whether we thought we needed a culvert or a crossing or a storm sewer, and then, of course, get the rest of the information, then make that decision.
But you'll keep a slot there. Anything that's going to put water over the road is probably one of the highest priorities, I guess, in my book at least, to resolve.
Yeah, I mean, if it's as simple as a culvert, we can do that in-house for probably less than $1,000 and do it ourselves. If it's a project where we got to run storm sewer, we could build it into the ramp or into somewhere else in the budget to do that.
Okay, so we'll revisit that in 2 or 3, or in 3, when we have our next street meeting. We'll want to revisit that to have that on a action item. Are you pretty confident that the only 2 utilities we're talking about is gas and phone?
Yeah, there's no water, there's no sewer, there's no cable.
Okay,
And where were those? Did
they're on the north side.
Okay.
I believe the gas crosses the road at some point and is on both sides at different places that we might have to contend with. But the telephone, I believe, is all on the north.
And property owners wise, we have, on the south side, we'd have 2 property owners to discuss a easement with. On the north side, it's only 1, correct?
Yeah, I believe that we would be able to, depending on the location of those utilities, the hope would be we'd be able to fit it all within the right-of-way and just get temporary easements.
Great. Okay.
But yes, 2 on the south, 1 on the north.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay. Great. Let's move on to well, I actually have a few items before we get to Oak Meadow, just to keep everybody in, well, let's talk about Oak Meadow for a second. We can do that, and then I don't want to keep everybody in suspense, I guess. So, Alan, if you want to go ahead and give us an update on Oak Meadow, please.
Okay. Oak Meadow, we received 50% plan submittal today, so I have not had a chance to look at those to really digest where we're at on that. My understanding is there's still a little bit that we need to, there's a water line towards the north end of the project where we need to nail down the location of that. Won't hinder the project, it's just a matter of where we can put the path. And where we have the drainage. So we'll need to nail that down. But aside from that, I think my understanding is we're looking pretty good on the plans for that. Along with that, got a construction cost estimate. That should have been provided in the packet. I'm not sure which spot it was. I think it was near the beginning. Actually, it's the very first thing after the agenda. That's actually down about $50,000 plus or minus from the last cost estimate at 30%. So as we've nailed this down, we've been able to get rid of some of the contingencies that were put in there for planning level. Not sure what we run into. And that's at $628,000. The last one was at $677,000. Anything else I wanted to say on that specifically? No. Hickory Drive, as we talked about last time, Hickory Drive was not included in the original scope of the project. When we scoped the project originally, it was just trying to accommodate Oak Meadow Drive and getting that completed. As we got into design around the 30% mark, we found that we needed to get the drainage from Oak Meadow to the river. And to do that, the ditch, Hickory Drive is the low point. And to do that, Hickory Drive would have had to have been about 2 feet lower with the ditch, which was not ideal. So we decided a storm sewer would be the appropriate thing to do there. So we asked Jobs for a mod on that, which I've included in here, and that mod is about $15,000. Of course, in this year's budget, we budgeted $50,000 for engineering. The engineering contract that we currently have with Jobs is for $48,500, I believe, which only leaves $1,500. And this is where Kyle Moore comes back into play. Of that 18,000 we have left in this year for engineering, which we know we're not going to be able to use this year for design of the Kyle Moore project. I would propose using that 18,000 to cover the mod for Oak Meadow. And before we talk about that specifically, the overall budget on this project. I know initially we talked about 450,000. As we've gone through it, it has expanded a little bit more than that. If you look at the cost estimate, we're looking at about 450,000 just to take care of the drainage. And if we don't take care of the drainage, I think we're just going to run into the same problems that we have now. The roads falling apart because the subgrade doesn't dry out because the ditches aren't adequate enough to get the water to the river. So my recommendation would be to do that. And then, of course, would be the pavement itself needs addressed. I know widening had been talked about, but if we can get a path in here and stay within the right-of-way, which I haven't looked at the plans on that, but it looks like the brief look that I took at the cross-sections, we can fit an asphalt path in to get the pedestrian traffic off the road. And then we really wouldn't need to widen the road, just repave it. One of the issues there, if we widened it, people might try and go faster. So I'd just like to, my recommendation would be just to, take what's there, repave it, put the path in, and do the drainage. Now, that all comes up to about 630,000, which, like we said, is more. In the draft budget that we're going to be presenting to council, I didn't have this in hand at that time. I put 600,000 in for Oak Meadow and was still able to accomplish pretty much everything that we were doing in the rest of the budget. I know last time I talked about piecemealing this, trying to get some of it from the ramp. With what we were able to do with the budget, I don't think we need to take anything out of the ramp. We'd still have the 650,000 for the ramp, and then still be able to do the paving and the drainage work on this project. And then finally, the path. Obviously, we were still about $30,000 over what I put in the budget for next year. We may have fee in lieu of funds that we could still use from new developments, or if we needed to come up with that other $30,000, I think we can do that and still have a pretty good budget for next year. And then I think that's everything that I was trying to purvey specifically. I'm sure there's questions.
Tim, Mel, you have any questions?
Do you have time to get the engineering done this year for Hickory?
I would say that we would, the engineering for Hickory is much less involved than it is for the whole Oak Meadow project, because we're just looking at putting a storm sewer down through there alongside the roadway. So I would say that it would track on the same course with Oak Meadow if we decide to go that route.
And given all the work that has begun to be done here, you're talking about putting, so this is obviously, as you said, a separate item from the ramp itself. Mm-hmm. You think everything will be ready to go at some point? I mean, when do you think the engineering's done? We've got everything ready to go. Now we're going to start working on the road.
Well, bidding. I mean, as far as bidding and then going?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, part of that's contingent upon making the decisions that we need to make here with what we're actually going to do. I think once we get that nailed down, let's see, we're September now. That would give us 3 months to the end of the year to get these plans wrapped up, and even could spill into 2018 to wrap them up, bid early 18, and get construction certainly by the end of next year. I think that's very realistic.
Do you have anything, Mel?
No.
Couple quick questions. The water line that you're talking about, I know this was, I think, the same water line that we were talking about initially.
Yes.
The issue to the north. how do you think that affects, or do you have any idea how that, when you say whether that's going to affect our ditches or affect our paving of the path, what exactly do you mean by that? How does it affect those two?
Depending on exactly where the water line is, depends on, it affects where we will put the drainage for that area.
Talking about cover? You're talking about cover on the water line?
Yes, cover on the water line. Well, vertical and horizontal. The information we have on the water line, we haven't actually gone, I don't think that has tracer wire on it, so we haven't nailed down the exact location. So horizontally, it could affect whether we put the storm sewer in front or behind it. And if it has to be behind it, that could affect the location of the path and whether we need to put drainage, like a catch basin, effectively in the path or off to the side of the path, or find a way to get it in. I don't think it will be a problem. I think we can get it all in. It's just a matter of how we're going to get it all in.
Yeah, I think we had talked about the path actually acting as your drainage area where you could potentially have your 2x2s there.
That was a potential option, yes.
Okay. Okay, and how much, is that something where you guys going to go up there and hydro excavate or do something to find the water line? Are you going to go down and maybe look at a few valves and measure down on the valves and see where that line
I
ends up
think we
being?
would need to probably pothole it and find out exactly where it's at least in one, maybe two locations, once we decide what we're going to do
Okay.
with the whole project.
Okay. Yeah, because I see in your preliminary costs, you don't have anything to deal with water lines or mess around with that stuff.
Very early on, we had that potential relocation in there, which was one of the things that took it much higher than it is now. But we think we won't need to relocate now since we're going with putting back storm sewer instead of ditches.
And is this still, you mentioned leave it the same width that it is now. Are you still thinking that you're going to berm this, or foot and a half berm on it? Or I'm looking for your line item that would tell me that you're going to berm this.
I haven't had much of an opportunity to look over this myself, but is that 1 foot berm?
1 foot berm.
What item is that?
Oh, I see it. Aggregate shoulder 304.
Oh, yep, there it is.
Yep, 35 cubic yards.
Mhm.
Okay. With your millings and such, have you ever? I've been in a lot of situations where we use millings for berm material. We have plenty of milling going on in Pataskala.
And
Might be worthwhile looking into.
yeah, we actually, the Shelley company with millings that they're willing to get rid of.
Oh, yeah.
They're giving them to us for Etna Parkway, or at Etna Parkway in Broad Street.
Kinda noticed that.
I've been trying to not use the millings for berm in a more urban setting, but use them on the country roads where it's not as noticeable in people's front yards, because it doesn't look as nice as the stone. But we have been using it.
Yeah,
for
but it's
berm.
free.
I don't
And
disagree.
it works out very well. It packs down nicely and actually stays in place better than the 304 does, quite frankly. Anyhow, just thought I'd mention that to you. Okay, do you want to talk about your modification? Modification
for Hickory?
Really quick, I just have.
Go ahead.
What's pothole? Is that just you're searching for a water line by digging a hole?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Just digging down on
I
it to
usually
find
can
out where
keep
it's
up
at.
with the vernacular, but that one stumped me. So.
You don't really want potholes, but this time you do.
I-
Okay, anything else on the preliminary? Okay, let's talk about your modification.
Hickory?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I haven't had a whole lot of time to look over that. Based simply on looking at the cost estimate for what it would take on Hickory Drive at 117,000 roughly, I don't think the mod is out of line. I think you usually look around 10 to 15% for engineering, so that's right in there. Does it also include
10% is usually a good number for.
Well, and I can see that the multi-purpose path was not included in our original scope, I guess. I did not realize that.
Yeah, that was where I was going with this, was the
Yeah.
multi-purpose path. I'm wondering why that wasn't in our original scope. We had sidewalks before, so,
Well, I
or
know-
did we? I should ask that question.
Well,
Did-
at one point, we were looking at just widening the road and try and
We
that may
looked
have
at all
been-
kinds of things.
Yeah, and that may have been when we scoped it, we were still looking at that option.
So if you'll go
I'll
back and look to see, we also talked about curb And we've talked about sidewalks on both sides, then one side.
Right. And I don't remember.
And then we talked
exactly
about
when
a
we spoke.
shared path, a shared lane, in our widening discussion. I understand the Hickory side of it, I just didn't understand the multi-purpose path.
Fair enough. I'll take a look at that.
Okay. And then, is there any chance we can get a set of plans to look at?
I emailed you a set this afternoon.
Okay, I'll print them off. 11 by 17s, I can get them. Okay.
I can print you off a set if you need.
I can get them, don't worry about it.
Mel, Tim, did you interested in a set of plans?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll take them. Sure. I'll take them if you got them. Yeah, I'll take 'em.
Do you have? And I have one printed out already, so I can just print myself out another one, and we'll give you guys what we have.
Thank you.
Great. I take them to soccer games, and soccer games are kind of slow sometimes.
Leisurely reading.
Yeah. Anything else on Oak Meadow?
Yeah, I got one last final question, and that's when do you need a final decision by us? What's our hard drop dead date? I know you're talking about putting this in the budget. Those discussions are coming up at the end. At least the preliminary, early stuff's coming up at the end of this month.
Well, what do we have to make decisions on? Hickory, basically, if we're going to do it as we've got it laid out, I think is the major decision. And then a part of that would be doing the modification for Hickory. I guess we're going to want to set a Streets Committee meeting, the next one here, probably at this meeting. If we could make decisions by then, I think that would help keep us on track if that's not making too much of a demand.
Well, I can talk about Hickory if you guys want to talk about Hickory. The only one that I don't necessarily know at this point is the multi-purpose path portion of that modification. There isn't much the drainage is what we need.
Right.
I don't see any way around it
There's
whatsoever.
really, we're going to do this and do it the right way. Spending $117,000 on drainage is worth every penny of it if we're going to go put $400,000 on a road.
Yes,
So
I agree.
you can talk to BJ on how you want to handle it, but if we have to come back to council, I'm willing to make, or at least to have a motion to make a recommendation. If you don't need it to go back to council, what do you think, Kathy? Any ideas if this one would have to go back to council? It's a modification to an existing contract that doesn't exceed, it does exceed 10%.
Exactly.
So it would probably have to go back to council.
Which
So-
is in my mind anyway is okay because they should know what you're putting where in the budget. They're going to have that discussion anyway.
Well, but we're going to use the existing
Oh, you're
money
talking-
from
you're talking-
the leftover Calmore engineering to do this. Is what
within this budget year.
Is that what I don't know that you said that necessarily, Alan, but that's what I kind of read between the lines.
If I
You
didn't
did.
say it, I meant to.
I figured
Yes.
that's where you're going.
I gathered that, yeah.
Okay.
Well, then I'll take a motion for a recommendation to council.
I'll make a motion that we recommend to council that we move forward with the engineering of the Hickory,
Ensuring modification.
engineering modification of the Hickory drainage project, sewer line, storm sewer line.
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay.
Walter,
Yes.
Hicken,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
And with that, Alan, you'll look into item number 2, right?
Correct.
And strike it if it's something that we think it should be included, or include it if it is not. Okay. Good. All righty. I've got a few items that aren't on the agenda before we get to the ramp, 18 ramp. And I guess in a general terms, one is called traffic lights. There are some questions out there for maybe a new development, but also existing developments, as well as an existing traffic light and warrant analysis, and whether they were done or not done, if they're properly installed or not, if they're installed properly in those locations or not. So I'm just going to kind of go through my list real quick. The new development on Broad Street, there west of Summit, is that one that is, I see the right-of-way stakes up for a widening. Is that going to receive a traffic light?
Yes.
Okay. Was a traffic analysis done?
That decision was made before I got here. I think that was based on the fire department's comments.
No, the fire department doesn't decide whether there's traffic lights or not.
I'll disagree with
So That's one that I'd like to, we're going to explore that. I'd like to explore that to see what the basis was. I hope the committee agrees with me on this, that we need to see the basis of that direction for a signal or non-signal. And certainly want to make sure that there was a warrant analysis done for it.
Well,
Go ahead.
is the ultimate determination trying to figure out if we need a light there?
Sometimes it's a desire for a light. Sometimes it's a need for a light. I think those are two different reasons why a light might be there.
Yeah, and my take on that is, I know within the first couple phases, I would almost guarantee that it's not warranted. Full build-out could be a possibility, so we'll look at that. And I think it was, of course, with the warrants, there's always the, as you say, political warrant is one that's just, we can decide we want to put a light there, which that does open us up to some liability, of course.
Well, and that brings up the rest of the discussion, which is Barrington Ridge. That was supposed to have a light there, never one installed.
I did not know that.
The settlement at build-out was supposed to have a light there, never installed.
Wow.
And we have a light installed at the Licking Memorial, lack of a better term, the emergent care there.
Yep.
And that was based on having a campus there, which never got built. So I have a feeling that does not meet the warrant. And so, as you said, Alan, and rightfully so, we're opening ourselves up for liability for just letting people put up signals where they may or may not be warranted. And additionally, as the settlement has taken 12 years to build out, maybe longer,
It's still going, yeah.
it's still going, and it may or may not meet warrant now. But I would hope that you could do some investigation on all those. I think. Go ahead, Kathy.
At the settlement, it was, the traffic light was to go in when the commercial property was developed.
Which we just had an expansion of the Duke and Duchess station, so I don't know where that kicks it in, whether it kicks it in or doesn't kick it in.
That I can't answer.
And we're under a new. This isn't. Now we've got Fisher Homes in there. I don't know who owns the commercial side of it anymore. It certainly isn't Deluxe.
No.
So.
The other thing is the traffic light at LMH. That one, they actually paid for the light, as well as the master cabinet is there to control all the other lights.
Well, I'm sure they wanted it. I'm sure they had wanted it, but at the same time, I've seen where foundations and poles have been installed and signal heads have not, or they've been put on flash.
Right.
And if it's not warranted, that light, it could not possibly meet warrant. So,
It was supposed to be a rather extensive complex put in there.
Right. I've seen the overall final development plan for it, and they're not even, one building doesn't come close. So, but that's my traffic lights.
Are we still talking about the settlement?
We can,
No.
sure.
Where are the pole bases in?
No. I'm not saying that any are in right now. I'm saying I've seen where development comes in. For instance, at the new development.
All right. I thought you said
They can build out their foundations, put in their conduits, they can bring their cabinet in, do all those things, and not install the lights themselves. So, anyhow. No, go ahead.
Okay. So you guys I'll start talking engineering stuff, and, I start making grocery lists in my head. So what I'm going to say is, when we have something as significant as building development right off Broad Street with an area that already has traffic issues, wouldn't we want there to be the infrastructure for that light, whether it went up right away or not, with the turn lanes and...
Don't take it as a negative or a positive. I'm asking the question if we know, making sure we have all our ducks in a row as far as for liability purposes. I think it's worthwhile, at least for everybody to know on council, what is being proposed and whether day one it's up or at a certain point during the build out it gets installed, one of the two. We have all kinds of, projects that are in flux that get widenings done, don't get widenings done. You know, all those things happen at different times at the development, and a signal is one that you want to put up at the correct time.
What, and just so I know, what liability on us as
Well-
far as the cost of installing, is that what we're talking, or?
Accident, if there was a accident that perhaps happened at the signal, somebody ran the red light, whatever, and somebody was relying upon that red light on Broad Street. I'm just going to give you a hypothetical. But somebody runs the red light on Broad Street, somebody pulls out of that, what's that development called?
Broadmoor
Broadmoor.
Commons.
That one. And they run, and they get T-boned. An attorney who knows what's going on could say the city, installed a light improperly. The developer wanted it or desired it at an improper time, and it didn't warrant a light there. So-
I've never come across a case like that, but that's interesting.
And it happens. Used to happen a lot more when people just put them up. When some cities would perhaps go out and put up stop signs when they weren't warranted, because somebody would want them up.
We might have some of those, but we won't.
I'm not going to talk about this. But as we get into having a better administration, we're a bigger town,
Right.
bigger city. I think that it's our responsibility to ask these. I don't know who may have approved that. Planning and zoning, I assume, approved or as you said, the fire department wanted it.
Right.
That's great.
And I think that would have to go through the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that's probably where it got approved.
Yeah.
My guess.
Well, and I guess I would want to say that if we're looking at those things, I want to see some consistency with the lights and in how they're structured. You want the same design at Mink Street as you would at, I don't know, Broad and Summit when we get to fix that. Or a new one for that matter. I want it to be the same.
And we have, of course, the Mink and Broad design was with mast arms, and that's what we've got as a standard moving forward. So the one at Broadmoor Commons is also mast arm and should look the same with the same components. That's what we're looking to standardize that as we upgrade and add.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with you 100%. Make them look the same color. Hopefully we have a city color. Do we have a city color?
I think it's black.
Is it? That's good color. That's fine. That works.
You don't want fuchsia?
We can match that. Everybody can match that. That's good. So that was kind of an item that wasn't on the agenda and one that had been brought to my attention.
What kind of time frame? It sounds like we need to do some more analysis on a couple of these from what you're saying.
Well, I'd hope that you could do, and I know your plate's pretty full, but if we could get at least some of this information back on these other, for instance, I think ones we know that are up that aren't warranted,
Right.
we need to find out why and how those got put up, and we need to look into what we need to do to make sure that the city at least has as little liability as possible on those. I don't know if we maintain them, for instance.
I'm sure we do.
Well, but in City of Columbus, the City of Columbus requires the developer to maintain them in perpetuity. They do it forever. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
I like it.
So that's just a question.
Yeah.
Seems like it's a private light for them. And that's what we want to get away from. We don't want to have private light situations, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But the other ones, I think at least for the new development, in my opinion, my question is it warranted, and when is it to be expected to be installed? At what phase or what
Right
section?
now, they're planning to do it at the very first phase, so it will be happening in.
So are we going to allow them to turn it on? So that's the next part of this is, if they install it, are they going to bag it and leave it for 2 years until it's warranted? Or are we going to let them test it and take the heads down and leave it in place until it's warranted? Those are just questions. I know we're far ahead of the topic, but they're not going to be they're going to make good progress
Not
here.
terribly far ahead of it, so. Yeah.
Right. So,
While we're on that subject, has the city ever taken, for instance, the money or, I assume that there has to be some way, given the history of the city and how developers leave and are no more, how do we ensure that, okay, well, now you're at phase 3, it's warranted, and it's turned into a different developer. It's turned into something else. Or even a better example would be someplace like Barrington Ridge.
I can think of some other ones. Watkins Road, widening on Watkins Road when they want to change the game. They want to change how they're going to do something. They want to reduce their responsibility after they agreed to do it one way or the other.
Well, just having it, of course, we have it, they'll put it in the final development plans. So if it stays the same developer, or even if it changes developers, we can certainly hold them to that. But if it, say a developer goes bankrupt and they're no more, I don't know what we would have for that unless we required a performance bond. That's about the only way I can think of to ensure that it would happen.
So as we're looking at our subdivision regulations and we're looking at all that good stuff, we should probably key in on this also. That's what I kind of saw in our subdivision regs, that this would be something good to tackle in that ordinance.
Agree.
Okay.
Did you have any time frame on that? I mean, I know we want to do it sooner than later, but it sounds like the first phase is trying to figure out what was supposed to happen where, why it did or didn't, and then maybe
I think
go some
the
analysis.
two that I would start with are the Licking Memorial and the new development, the Broadmoor development. Those would be the two that would be on my first list, and probably the development that's occurring now would probably be first.
Okay.
And then we can go back and unearth all the stuff on the other ones. So, if we have any other issues on signals? Okay. Widening on Blacks or widening on Watkins. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, BJ's been kind of took the lead on that. We had a meeting with Miranda's representatives here roughly 3 weeks ago, and both of those are required per the final development plans, but neither of them had happened. The Watkins Road one, the Watkins Road one was supposed to go in as part of Phase 3, which is what was essentially completed here within the past couple months. The one on Blacks Road was supposed to happen at the end of Phase 1, I believe. So we met with them, said, hey, why hasn't this happened? Nobody seemed to know. But we said before you can start building houses, we need to have either the improvements or bonding for the improvements. So they reluctantly agreed to that.
To which one? Bonding or getting it done?
Well, it sounds like Watkins Road. So for both of them, there were plans put together roughly 10 to 15 years ago. Watkins Road is the one that is closest to being completed. That is in review with Licking County right now. Licking County had some comments to bring it up to current standards, and that one they should have a design complete, I believe, in the next month or so, and then I think we would get a bond for that one once the plans are done, and then Blacks Road should be shortly to follow, I'm guessing early next year. But we did require bonding or performance of both of them before houses are built.
So if they bond them, how long is that? Is that a 1 year? Is it going to be the next construction season it has to be built, or what's your feeling on having them get that stuff done?
Well, we've discussed that there would be a time frame, but not what that time frame is.
I see. Okay.
Open to suggestion.
Go ahead,
I
Tim.
have a question. I thought that the Watkins Road widening was only contingent on the road actually connecting to Watkins, and the developer was changing that.
At one point, they had
Wanted to.
considered.
Go ahead. Yeah.
At one point, they had considered changing that, like just making that a cul-de-sac and not coming out onto Watkins Road. But then, as we told them, they would have to redo their final development plan and do a new traffic study, because what they've proposed was based on both of those access points.
So then they said, that's okay, we'll just keep it the way it is.
Yes.
Thank you.
So going back to the bond question, I would say that if they got their plans done in the fall winter time frame, that you would require them to do it within the next. They're going to want to build houses. They're going to build houses in there, and you're going to start having people in there within the next 12 months. So I would think the widening would have to occur within the next 12 months. That's the way I would look at it. I mean, if you want to be if you wanted to extend that a little bit, you could do 18 months, which for them, that means they have to go through 2 cycles of renewing their bond. But, I mean, whichever. But I would try to key it in on when do they expect having people there, because that's when that widening should be done.
And that's for Watkins Road, or is that for both?
Blacks is worse than Watkins. They should have blocks done.
Years ago.
I mean, I think you're really giving them a benefit by not requiring blacks to be done before they build anything and not letting them bond it. I mean, but that's not my say. I would just, to me, they would do both widenings at the same time, because one, that's better for the city, to try to have the disturbance done, in that location, one contractor, get it done, and then I would think the minute you think you're gonna have houses occupied, you'd want widenings done. That's my opinion. I don't know if anybody else, so I would say 12 months after the plans are approved.
Yeah. I see your take on that. I've been trying to work with them. Who knows why this wasn't done when it was supposed to be done on blacks. We know Watkins needs done as part of this one, so I'm trying to catch that one because that's where we're at. And then I was thinking we would probably give them, so much time to get Watkins done, and then, kind of go right behind that with blacks, give them, a little bit more time, being that one's been hanging out for a while. I see your point that it should have been done. Nobody knows why it wasn't. So I'm willing to work with them a little bit, but at the end of the day, we got to have something.
Well, if you went 18 months, that's 2 construction seasons that they should be able to get it. That shouldn't be too much. But again, who's to say when they might just, when something might occur and they might not be there to get it done. That's why I think the urgency is 12 months, get it done. Be my opinion. Okay. That's really, that's all I can put on Alan's plate, I think, right now.
Sure you don't have a little more?
So,
2018 ramp.
yep, that's where I was going next.
All right. Haven't, so this is just a preview. Haven't looked at it too in depth yet. Like we've been doing, like we did this year, we're shooting for $650,000 for next year. Couple things have come up that I didn't have on anticipated for this year. One of those specifically is Summit Road from Broad to the tracks. I think I'd had that grouped in together with another section, and it didn't rank as high. But going back, I'd had somebody mention a concern on that, and it's pretty bad. So I'd like to squeeze that in, either with a leveling course and a chip seal, or mill and fill with some base repair. I'd like to add that one in. So what I've got so far is Headley's Mill. We originally had that one in next year at $450,000. That was based on 5% base repair. As we've continued to look at that road, as you've probably noticed, we've done a bunch of tree trimming. As part of the problem with that road, the light can't get through and dry out the road. So that's a lot of our problem. We're also going to do a lot of in-house drainage work, cutting off berms, making sure our ditches are good to go here over the next 6 months. And then I think a lot of our problem is just surface on that road. So we can just do some surface repairs, which are cheaper than base repairs. So the number that I'm shooting for on Headley's Mill is about $300,000. Bring that down a little bit. And then as part of this year's, we had originally hoped to do Mill Street from Main to Township. That, because Nate needs to do some water line work in that area, we held off till next year. And then as part of this year's, we were also going to try and do stuff with the corner and the sidewalk there. What we realized is that we need some drainage in that area. So I want to do some in-house drainage to make sure we get that right. And then go from Main Street down Mill Street to Township, and then effectively returns to Creek and go to the bridge and include the parking lot there at Municipal Park, right next to the baseball field, right next to the road, and do all that. And that's roughly $125,000 what we're looking at. So between those, we're at about $425,000. And then Summit Road, that one's roughly 100,000. Very preliminary numbers, still looking at what we need to do, what the best solution is, and putting numbers to those. And then the last thing, which was still on there from last year, proposed for next year, is to microsurface Barrington Ridge. And a microsurface uses emulsion and sand, effectively, to put a new, like a sealant course on the whole road. I think something was done back in Brightwater some years ago that was more like a chip seal that had stone in it that was not popular. The microsurface would just have sand-like material, so it shouldn't look like a chip seal. It should look like pavement, but it's just a sealing course.
I think that was called a rejuvenator back in Brightwater. It's not a chip and seal. but-
Right, it looked like chip and seal, though. Is why
Yeah, it
I
was
don't
done in
remember
a
it. I wouldn't
kind
know.
of an odd way, and it was a real mess.
That's what I heard. So I'm a little bit reluctant on the microsurface, but it'd be a pretty good cost savings if we can get it to look good. And we're going to have a good look at it. So on Poppleton Road, Poppleton South up in Hazelton, behind Kroger, they've extended that. It got completed roughly around the time that I got here. At least they got the roads done before I got here. They paved in the wintertime, and the pavement just looks horrific. It's settled in places, and it's where they paved in the winter, it's separated the emulsifier from the stones, and there's pock marks all over the place. So we actually had a meeting out there here just the other day with the developer. We're going to do a mill and fill. It's a cul-de-sac we'll do a mill and fill on the straight part. That's where the settling has occurred. They're going to do some base repairs on that. And then in the bulb, we decided we'd let them go with a microsurface. So, because mostly on the bulb, it's just where the emulsifier and the stone is separating and there's pocks. So with that microsurface, they should be able to seal that up. So we'll get a good look at what that looks like on that road. That should be happening in the relative near future and before we have to make a decision on the 2018 ramp. So hopefully we can get that done, get a good look at it, know what it's going to look like, and then go from there.
If you want to see that microservice, New Albany just did it up on Smith Mill Road between Beach and Kitzmiller. They also did it on Dublin Granville Road between Babbitt and
I couldn't get to the place. I need to
Okay.
write it down first.
Smith Mill Road
Smith Mill?
between Beach and Kitzmiller. They actually went all the way through. I think they went all the way to 62, actually. So
Okay.
it's a pretty long stretch. And then also on Dublin Granville Road between Babbitt and I think they may have gone all the way into town. They may have gone all the way to 3rd Street. So up there in New Albany, they just did it in the spring.
Okay. Do you think it's appropriate for a subdivision?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have personal experience with it, so I wanted to get a look at it. So I'll take a look at those.
Make sure they do a good job crack sealing first.
Okay.
That's all on that.
Alan, what stretches of, are you thinking about the entire ridge or the road, Barrington Ridge?
Throughout the subdivision.
And what was your estimate on that? Do you have any idea?
115?
115?
Yeah. And that's an older estimate. I don't think we've done any microsurfacing, certainly not since I've been here. So I'll look to update those numbers as well, make sure we're in the right ballpark.
I'm trying to remember what Brightwater's got.
It wasn't microsurface.
Yeah, it was something
It
different.
was, they called it rejuvenator or something like that. I remember what it was. I remember them doing it.
I'm talking about the second time.
Yeah, when they went back and repaired it.
Well, they milled it and filled it, it's my understanding.
Yeah, that's what I understood too, is they just
Yeah.
milled it right off and
Right.
I think if
And
there
put
was,
asphalt in.
yeah, it was.
So, some of these items that we've talked about with drainage, are those on your ramp anywhere? Are those, I mean, some of this, where we're, for instance, the cable road drainage, that kind of stuff, is that anything?
I did not include that in the ramp, no. I do have, I've included a couple things specifically. Some of it I've built into just road materials. Like if we just have to do a culvert, we can provide that into the materials. If it's $25,000, if we're looking at running the storm sewer, I did not put that in there anywhere specifically, and we would have to identify where to put that. And I'm trying to look. I know in years out, I was putting placeholders for drainage projects. I think next year, there's a project for Dixon Road improvements that's like a 25,000, but I don't know where that's at. So, not specifically, I think is the short answer to that.
So when you say you're doing some tree trimming, is that the guy on the tractor with his arm trimmer reaching up and trimming trees? Is that what you're?
It's, well, on Headley's Mill specifically, we rented a JLG, a lift, so that we could get up and trim a lot of those back and really cut out a lot, especially right there, like at Cable. There was a bunch just south of Cable where the road's in really bad condition. We cut a bunch of those off. We took a lot of the dead ash. We've been very active on that. We'll take them out ourselves if they're small enough. But we had $50,000 in this year's budget for tree maintenance and removal. So we've been hiring a lot of that out where there's bigger trees that our guys can't quite handle. We don't have the equipment for. And we've used most of that. Yeah, Headley's Mill specifically, we've done a lot. But that also includes, we're taking the arm mower and mowing stuff back. I know that's not a real popular choice, but it's a very cost-effective choice.
Yeah.
And, by next spring.
Dixon Road looked like it got hit by a hurricane. You
Next
guys went
spring,
through
you
there.
won't even be able to tell.
Well,
So did Columbia,
so.
for that matter.
I mean, they're, that's
We
pretty.
could take more time and do it in-house. It's just a trade-off. If we wanted to, go through actual chainsaws and take the bucket truck and go trim stuff back, it's a lot quicker, a lot cheaper for us to do it this way. Doesn't look as good. But if we wanted to go to doing it the other way, we certainly could. It's just a trade-off.
I have one more question with the ramp. I'd like you to look and see where Cleveland Road falls on that. And I think that you guys need to go out and take a look at it. There's more and more traffic on that crossover street, and every year the edges erode off, and so you can barely pass anybody when the road is in decent condition, let alone when everything is a pothole.
Any specific section, or is it all the way from Mink to Taylor?
It's basically from Taylor to Summit.
Taylor to
That's
Summit.
bad, yeah. And they try not to send school buses down it, but they're still, it's just not in good shape.
Okay. I will look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that before, and I'm pretty sure we've got it on there. I know we accounted for it, but I can't remember when.
Yeah, they went through and, filled it and tried to clean up some of the edges. And it was bumpy, but it worked, But, when you get into situations where somebody might be going too fast, and then they hit some of those, and then they come into your lane because it's happened several times. So, and then there's kids that walk along there. It's just not a good setup.
Wow, good. Yeah, that's right, because there's a housing development right there, too.
Yeah, and so some of them walk to school, and it's.
All right. Yeah, well, of course, the Taylor Road Trail at least should help with that. We
Hopefully.
might be able to put like a scratch course and then like a chip and seal on that, kind of like we did on Hollow Road, for a little bit cheaper solution than repaving the whole thing specifically. But I'll look at that.
Okay.
Anything else on your list, Alan?
Well, I was just looking through. No.
Tim?
No.
Mel?
Nope, I'm good.
I had one other thing. Over at the road over Foundation looks really good. They did a nice job. People were asking now that the road's been fixed, why we can't open gates. But it's not fixed. One of the things that was at a park board meeting, a person brought up potentially having a way to get bikes around the gates.
Okay.
And I had brought, BJ was at this meeting, and when you say that Shelley Company has a bunch of millings that could be used, I would think that'd be something we could do in-house, and just put some millings around the gate post, whichever makes the most sense
Okay.
to do. But it was a good point that the person brought up, to be able to get a bike around there without going through the mud and through getting off the pavement. If you could look into that, I would appreciate that. Maybe Jason can get some of those fresh millings we've got and fix that for him.
Okay.
That's all I have. And I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Walther?
Yes?
Hicken?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.